Hey there, Shopomaniacs. You're listening to another episode of the Shop Talk Show, a podcast all about front-end web design and development. I'm Dave. No more ums and likes. Rupert. I'm Chris. I'm giving it up.
Yeah, it's a personal journey for you.
Trying very hard. Apparently, the first rule is you have to close your mouth.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's difficult.
I'm not sure. I think I have it too, but I was noticing some fellow moms and dads the other day that had it worse than their own kids. And I'm like, no wonder where they get it. Come on, people, let's do this. We have a special guest here today, all the way from South Africa, Peter Pistorius. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Thank you for letting me be here. I don't have any formal training in removing ums and likes, and I might struggle. So,
You seem like you're doing a good job so far.
Yeah.
However,
for radios. Sounds good.
struggle immensely. So now I'm closing my mouth.
See, it's a video moment. It's very subtle, but Dave's mouth is literally closed right now. Got it.
Like a fish.
Peter, I don't think we've ever met. I don't know though. Now I'm doubting myself all of a sudden. But maybe let's say we haven't. Yeah, or what?
We have never met, but I feel like I know you, considering how much of your career has influenced my career. You know, CSS tricks is just something that I absorbed as a up and coming web developer, and it was around for such a long time that I feel like I know you.
Yeah, wonderful.
But who am I?
Well, I'm familiar with some of your work as well too. I was just looking at you have a very simple personal website, which I feel like is nice in that it could educate people on how unintimidating a personal website can be. It could be, for example, a paragraph. So rock that if you'd like. But it links to this thing called billable.me, which I think is like a great URL to have. And it's just the most no-nonsense thing in the world. Like you need one invoice. It's just looks like a bunch of content editable stuff on a table, and you type it in there and probably hit print and got your PDF and you send it. I had to do that literally this morning. And I have my own version of the same thing, and I think that rules. So everybody check that out. What a good idea, Peter.
It feels like a rite of passage to build an invoice, editable invoice.
Yeah, not the first I've seen, but this one is very classy, so well done. But mostly known recently for a ton of work in the React and framework landscape with a thing called Redwood.js that was in the news recently because you all decided to do this huge pivot. So you went Redwood.js has become known as Redwood GraphQL, which is like sort of kind of deprecated except for security. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that framework it lives on, just not as actively developed because a new idea has taken root, which is this thing called Redwood SDK. So I guess that was the big news. If you go to the Redwood.js homepage, there's kind of like a letter on it that says, this is what we're going to do, which is, a huge announcement. So I guess congratulations is in order. I mean, it seems kind of like a big new chapter, and that's usually worth celebrating. Can you tell us all about that?
Yeah, I can. I can give you the lay of the land and tell you how that decision came about. So I've always felt a little frustrated when I was building websites. I felt like I wasn't really focusing on the code that I wanted to write. What I thought I was doing was rather focusing on the framework that I was building in. And it always felt like there were these incredibly rough edges. As long as I followed the happy path in the framework, things felt good. But the moment I deviated from the norm and I wanted to take my intuition as a programmer who's been building on the web for 20 years, I wanted to bring that to the forefront. All of a sudden, it didn't work. Things didn't work the way I expected them to work. And the same was true for what we built in Redwood GraphQL. It just didn't feel right. So we went back to the drawing board and we built a new framework called Redwood SDK. And we laid out a couple of principles for that. The first one being that we wanted zero magic. So no magic exports, nothing that was hidden from you, no crazy abstractions or black boxes. And the second one was that we wanted composability over configuration. So we wanted to make sure that you can build your routes using standard TypeScript and expose those to a HTTP server in a way that felt composable and connectable, without having to lose part of the request and response chain. And the third one was that we wanted to focus entirely on web principles. And I think we've built something excellent, and I'd love to go over what we've achieved there.
Sure, I already have so many questions, but that's cool.
Like
but
we could
what
go
is
through that list, right? Like, and just kind of like hear more about it. I said, like, I apologize. We could go through that list and hear more about each one of those.
We could, but what's the what is it overall? It's still Redwood.js. I think people thought of as like it's in the category of a React framework. So it's for building websites, but you get a bunch of parts too.
Yeah.
You get I don't even remember what the whole list was, but the list was pretty long with
GraphQL,
Redwood. It was kind of a
Vite,
parts included. Yeah, well,
the
React
cell
right at the top of the
which
list.
I actually super love. So I'm curious where that goes in this.
Yeah, cells was
new
interesting.
paradigm.
We've
It's
thrown
gone.
it out.
And
It's totally gone.
yeah, it's
I like
I'm gonna tell you why.
that part.
I mean, there is
Maybe
an
the magic.
incredibly good reason why. Yeah. So what Redwood GraphQL was a GraphQL server, and it was a split website architecture. So you had a server side that was running Express or something like that was running GraphQL, and then you had a single page app side, and they were put together in a mono repo. And then we created bindings across these two platforms, and we included all kinds of nice things like Storybook and testing, and we had probably 30 different authentication providers that you could use. And it was a really great framework for the time, but I think that GraphQL went the way of the enterprise. The deployment targets that we were picking just made us, slowed us down, and all the authentication providers that we picked also slowed us down. So those integrations that we had started building into the framework eventually became an immense amount of, it took an immense amount of momentum to just get a release out. And it didn't feel like we were really helping the developer with picking their technology choices. We were just giving them more options and saying, hey, if you pick one, it's easier to use in Redwood.js.
Yeah, it seemed like that maybe was like a reason you would pick it though, because it felt like wasn't there some connection to the GitHub dude Tom or whatever, right? And that was famously a Rails app, and Rails is famously opinionated, and it was like, oh, this is kind of like Rails maybe. Is that comparison anywhere near accurate? And the list was like, it's React, you're running a node server, we're going to tell you you're going to use Yarn. So hope you like Yarn. It's going to be GraphQL. Prisma is going to be the thing you use. You're going to write in TypeScript. Babel's going to process it. You're using Vite. Just is built in. Storybook is built in. A lot of names. So if people looked at that list and said, man, thanks for the opinions. But like some people might be like, that rules because I don't want to make these choices and I want it all just to work together. And other people might look at that list and be like, that's just way too many opinions. Like I'm scared of it because it's too much has been chosen for me. And are you kind of saying maybe we chose too much for people?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that we made all those decisions for you meant that, and we integrated them deeply. It wasn't as if we exposed the connections to you. So if you wanted to remove one of those parts, it was impossible. So even if you wanted to upgrade one of those parts, if we hadn't done it for you, you couldn't get there. And that made things incredibly frustrating for users who deviated slightly off the happy path. And it also made it very hard for us to maintain. Don't get me wrong, like myself and Tom Preston Warner, like we came to Redwood GraphQL with a vision. The vision was to help developers build websites faster, and we wanted to reduce that cognitive load that people had when they were building or picking technologies. We just said, hey, we'll do that for you. But, you know, a 5-year-old framework that had made those decisions, some of them didn't last long enough. Like Yarn, for instance, the new soup of the day was PNPM. And to pull that out of what we had done was really hard. So it's still using Yarn. And we didn't, in the new framework, I felt like I didn't want to make those decisions for people anymore. I wanted to make sure that it was composable, standards-based, as thin and light as possible, and made a ton of sense. That for me was the most important part, that if you send a request to the server and you get a response at the other end, I want you to be able to follow every single path and reason about it in a logical way. And I think we've done that. We've built something that I think is probably the best framework out there.
So that's a neat. Why don't we do routing for a minute? So when we say routing, we mean I want to kind of describe a URL or the part of the URL that's after the main domain part. So like slash is the homepage, and slash about is the about page, and slash API slash upload is where we upload files or something. I want to describe those. Every app I've ever worked on in my life, you need to care about your routing. And I don't remember how it was in Redwood.js. Doesn't matter. Let's switch to be talking about Redwood SDK now, the new thing, and we can circle back to the whys and all that. But it's a bit of a different beast, perhaps much less opinionated in many ways, and more opinionated in one very crucial way, which is the hosting, which we'll get to. But if we're sticking with routing, you named that as one of the big three, really. And Dave, you called this out as well when we were talking about it a little bit. It's this like it lives at source-/worker.tsx, I guess, and Dave called it Rails-like in a way, but it's just that's your opportunity
manifest
to do
of routes. You're almost express like you're saying route/foo. Call this function.
Call every route as a function, you say, and the homepage does a nice job of calling it out because it's like, here's two different routes, which are strings that just describe what route it is, and one of them returns like a component that you're importing, which feels very React-like, like just pull in this JSX component, and all that route does is return that page, which is like, oh, well, sweet. And another one right below it is very raw. It just returns a new response. So when you talk about that, embracing kind of web platform stuff, is that what you mean? It's like, you could return JSX if you want, or you can get you can get as low level as you want,
Absolutely. And one of the principles that we wanted to bring to the table was co-location. If code frequently changes together, place it together. And because our routes it can be expressed as just an array of a function, or an array of routes, you can literally co-locate your API calls and your page calls together in a single file, and then you can reason about them as a contained unit. So you can have your components, your middleware, your server actions or server functions, your routes, all in the same space. And that feels really good. If you have a blog section of your website, just do that. Just keep them on one folder, and you can reason about everything there. Maybe the blog section has an RSS feed that it's sending down the wire, and you can just write that as an ordinary fetch response object, and you have that perfect control. And you also receive the request, not an abstraction of it, just the request. So you can pass that off to other servers if you want to. Like if you want a proxy, just take the request, pass it to another server, you get the response back, send it back down the wire. Feels like you got an amazing amount of power with that.
So how does it looks like regular old routing, or in a way, like this is server-side routing. But Of course, when we're thinking of a React site, a lot of times we think about a lot of these frameworks tend to help with, or at least allow, single-page app routing style. So if I was going to do that, it looks certainly possible to do, except for now it's not co-located. I'd be returning from this router to a component where the single page app routing takes over, and then I'm like, oh crap, now my routes are in two different places. Is that how it would work, or is there a way to flip on SPA mode or something?
Totally. And I've actually today is the 10th of June, and I released a video of how we are doing this. So I'm just going to roll back to a little bit of a description of what the framework is, so people can understand what they're getting. Please. And then I'll dig into how those two mechanisms actually work. Okay, so Redwood SDK is a Vite plugin. The Vite plugin gives you server-side rendering, React server components, and it gives you access to a thing called MiniFlare. MiniFlare is Cloudflare's emulation environment.
For workers.
Redwood SDK for workers, yeah, and it gives you database, queues,
Oh,
R2
it's a
file
lot.
storage.
It's more than workers. Okay.
You can even get AI. So like what happens if you use their AI APIs, it will forward it to their servers and it feels like you're coding locally. So it's an emulation environment for Cloudflare. Single
It's pretty
package
sweet.
install.
I love that they bought it too. That was a little acquisition nugget from
Really?
Cloudflare. Yeah, I think some dude did it, and then they had like Wrangler and whatever. So, but they yeah,
I did
think
not
it was
know
a
that.
number of
That's
years ago.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, because it's
All right, so
great,
you get-
isn't it? Like, don't you want that so much? I love the idea that what you're working with locally is what their platform is. So it's like no surprises when you.
That goes to your
MiniFlare
no
rules.
magic thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
The thing
Yeah.
I'm working on is close to Metal as a deployment environment. I think that's cool. I think the tie-in you have to Cloudflare, it's all over the docs or whatever. I assume you can deploy it elsewhere, but it seems like that is a smart choice in terms of like you can get really, I said like, in terms of the fact that you can get really close to your deployment environment, which is not a thing you get with competitor frameworks or whatever.
Yeah. The thing is that you really want to build on a single environment. You want to feel like, and this was something that we were doing in the early days of web development. If you were deploying to Linux, you built on Linux, because if you're building on Windows, you got crazy surprises. Like even just in the imports and like the way the libraries interacted with your machine differently, it made a lot of sense to work in the same environment, at least a POSIX environment. And MiniFlare is a self-contained Cloudflare environment. And what I love about it is you install this thing, it gets installed as part of Redwood SDK as part of the package, and you have access to database, queues, storage. So it's not like you have to go off and configure a whole bunch of other stuff to be productive. And the fact that Redwood SDK works on Cloudflare, and that's our we made this exclusive decision to focus on a single platform. The reason why we did that is because we think it's better for you to focus on the code you want to write rather than the framework that you're building it in or the platform that you're deploying to. Really what matters at the end of the day is building a product, not so much, all the other stuff that comes around it. Like maybe at some point you become really successful and then it starts mattering. But in the beginning, you just want to scratch your itch. You want to run one command and you want to ship it to production, and you want to have all your infrastructure and services scaffolded for you without you having to worry about it. And that's the power that you get by picking a provider, a platform like Superbase or like Cloudflare.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
You don't even have to run it in a Docker, right? MiniFlare just does it all.
Just does it all.
That's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet.
One of the things that I found so surprising is that when I run PNPM release, which is what ships it to production, 9 times out of 10, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, it works. And it's live and in production. And I did this a couple of times and it surprised me. I was like, wow, it's working. It's working. It's working. And then I thought to myself, like, but why am I surprised by this? It's almost as if I've been trained to believe that if I ship to production, it's not going to work. It's going to break in some way that was unexpected. And that was my normal experience for many years. And I don't have that anymore. Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's
Okay,
part
so
of the
it's
reason I like static site generation. I know what I'm going to get. I've seen the
Right.
product
It's so
before
simple
it
that-
ships out the window,
Right.
ships out the factory.
So we have to come back to the whole single page app thing,
We
client-side
do, but you were
navigation.
trying to describe what it is, which is that it's a Vite plugin first, and that unlocks all this stuff, right? It processes your React, it makes SSR work, which is more than, it's really not just SSR, but server-side components, right? And all that. And then, okay, yeah, I guess that's enough. We could get back to the routing situation.
And then on top of that, we created this router. And the router really describes the different routes that you want. So in other words, I want to serve my home page, and my home page should return a React component. The React component, the page, is nested in a document. That document describes it describes the head, the body, what div element you should place the React component into or the page into, And then it also includes client-side hydration. So what's happening when you access that page, this home page, for instance, you're getting streamed HTML. Along with that, you're getting something called Flight, which is a React server component concept. And then you're getting the client-side hydration that reads the flight and makes things interactive and does all the magic that React is giving you. We surface this document to you through a method called render. So you say, render my document, and inside of that document, render my page. You can have multiples of those. So you can have static site, you can only serve HTML. You just remove the client-side hydration part from that on a different URL. Or you can serve real-time stuff. So if you want real-time React, you just modify the client part of it. Or if you want single-page apps, you just take over the navigation and you say, okay, when you hit the back button or the forward button on the browser, or when you click on a link, instead of going to the server and requesting it and doing a whole entire page refresh, just go fetch the RSC component, the flight data, and do a diff on the client side and use a view transition in order to animate what the differences look like. So you can go from request response to real time to single page app by changing like 3 lines of code. And you don't have to architect your app any differently.
So you're still, let's say my homepage then returns a JSX component that just, has some stuff, but it's a little bit, is the expectation then, different frameworks do it different ways, but like JSX can't express like a doc type, So you almost got to all right, I'm just going to return the HTML element, I guess, or is it on me to start thinking about I should make a layout component, and then the homepage will use the layout component, because I don't want to repeat myself too much with like the page title and the CSS that it loads and all that stuff. Is there help with that, or is it kind of like, no, you should do that yourself. You should think all that out yourself.
So in our starters, we always give you a document that has a title and all that other stuff in it, where you can include your Tailwind CSS and the basic structure of what you have. We include that for you, but it's pretty bare bones at that point. You can do layouts as well. We have a layout function, and if you place routes within a layout, it'll use those, and you can nest them.
Okay, so there's a little help there. That's cool.
Totally, yeah. And what I love about what we've built is you can understand what's happening on the screen just by reading the code. We also have middleware, proper middleware, that runs globally for every single request. And then we also have a concept called interrupters, which can run on a per request, a per route basis. And what that looks like is, on a route, you can define a function that returns a response. But you can also associate an array of functions to a route. And then if either one of those returns early, that interrupts the flow of the what's returned. So as an example, you could create an interrupter that looks to see if a user is authenticated. If they're not, you return a response that says, hey, you're not authenticated, with a correct error message, and then a header to redirect them to the correct page. So they will not get access to the last page, which is the one that they were trying to access. They'll get interrupted and forwarded to somewhere else.
So each route is an array of responses or array of functions, and whichever one. So what if it doesn't return the middle one? Then it's just like, oh, they were authenticated then, so move on to the next function.
Yeah. And what's great about that is you can pull out that require authenticated function, stick it somewhere else, and reuse it throughout your code base. So then it reads as if this requires a post. The user should be authenticated, etc., etc. And then they'll get the final response.
Can you I assume you can redirect after that if somebody's not user or context.user new response login page? How does that work?
Totally. So on the response, you can set a header that provides the location, and the location would just be whatever the login page was. So you get the error code, you get the redirect response, and then they would
Because
get
you're
like a
dealing
proper
with native HTML responses now, it's more or less just 301ing to or whatever unauthorized is.
Yeah, I forget as well. But yeah,
402. I should know these by heart. I don't. Didn't
So,
wake up thinking about HTTP responses today.
who does? The only one I can remember is I'm a teapot, which I think is 405.
It's the
Might not
only
be.
one you need to know. 404 not found. We all know that one.
So I've got this thing that I've been trying to say about the framework we're building, but I don't know if it really works. Can I test it out on the two of you?
Sure, yeah,
To
I'll
see
do
if you
some
re-
marketing testing. Yeah, hit
Well,
it.
we do this. This is what
This is
we
what I
do.
do. This
We
is our
workshop.
thing.
We boost things. This is what we do.
So, maybe I should give the context and then deliver the line, or do you think I should deliver the line and then
Hit us
explain it
with
after?
the line. Hit us with
No,
the
yeah,
line.
the line, because I see if I go to Redwood SDK, this is what we're talking about right now. It says this could be the start of something small, so we could critique that, but I assume it's going to be in the same vein, right? So let's hear the new one.
So it's Redwood SDK. This is your daddy's framework.
Okay.
No context makes it a little confusing,
Awkward.
perhaps, but yeah.
I will say the use of the word "daddy" is a little risky. So
Yeah, there's
I
a
think
little-
that has different connotations in different communities. But
Mostly
Yeah,
positive
that's-
ones, though, right? Who doesn't like a daddy? Nobody. I don't
So-
get. Is the goal like it's old school? Is more the thing.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's this saying that says, this ain't your daddy's, thing.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
Catalog.
okay. Yeah. And I'm thinking that what we've built here actually feels a lot like what I was building, how I was building websites with PHP. It feels like the same experience. It just makes a lot of sense. And you got request response, and you can ship to prod with one command. So it's like your dad's framework. When I was doing this, it was 20 years ago. I'm not that old, and my daughter is 3, so she's not coding yet. So it probably doesn't make sense. But what I'm trying to say is this is like your dad's old framework, but new. It probably doesn't work.
Yeah, maybe it's too focused on the old and not enough on the new, But maybe you don't care. Like maybe not all tech needs to follow whatever.
what did
trends.
you say? The start of something small? That was the other one.
That's what's at RWSDK.com. Nice little domain pickup there, I'd say.
I think that's a good one. And this in the vintage vibes here is good. I think I would stick with that because I think that's what everyone's craving. I'm looking at your docs. The API surface is super small. And that's refreshing. Almost like you have a very big tie-in with React Server components. It looks like that's maybe not for me, but the model that you have could apply to something else, web components. So it's that part of it's very interesting. Just a framework that does less. I watched the Apple keynote, not to get everyone hyped up on liquid glass right here in the morning. I watched it. It's interesting. It's an interesting UI paradigm. I just found myself wanting less from the operating system. I kind of want less. I want less. Just dim it down. Like make it go. It is making it go away by making it invisible. But I want less menus, less things to think about when I'm operating a phone. So this feels.
It feels like so less that you wouldn't, because it is a React framework, but it looked like it doesn't even need to be necessarily. Like if you just didn't need any front end at all, it could just be a API service.
Totally. And what we've seen people do with Redwood SDK is because it's request response and you can just return HTML if you want. We've actually seen people embed web components and HTMX inside of a Redwood SDK app. And the two can actually communicate with each other. People have also embedded Hono, so they'd have a Hono API service, and they just import that in and just pass it along because it's just request response. So the capability, the flexibility that you get is incredible because we focused really on what the web is meant to be about. And our decision is, we made a decision to say, if the web, the network or the browser gives you a capability, we're not going to abstract it. We're just going to expose it to you. And that's what we want to make possible. Because it feels like, and I alluded to this earlier, it feels like if you are coding today in any other framework, what you're actually learning is the other framework. You're not learning the fundamentals of web technology anymore. Certainly we're working within that realm, but you have to understand the documentation in order to get something done. And with Redwood SDK, you just need to understand how the web works to get something done. And I think there's a massive difference there because it feels right. I don't know why we started abstracting so much away from developers.
That's why I said to Chris before the show, this almost feels, when you hear JavaScript framework, you think front-end UI library, which maybe Redwood GraphQL was.
Yeah.
But this feels, when I was looking at it just from a glance, almost like a back-end framework for websites. I'm going to read the navigation. It's request handling, database, storage, real-time, message, queues, cron jobs, environment variables, authentication.
Mm-hmm. Not a lot of front-end stuff, is there?
Zero about like, component libraries and
you want it.
Yeah, right. And that is cool. A lot of the other frameworks, I hate to, we said no comparisons here, but the other frameworks sort of have a big buy-in, namely like page folder-based routing is sort of one, and you kind of have like the magic routes. That's a pretty common thing. I generally like that, but if this was like a Subway takes kind of thing, I'm now starting to skew to routes file in my.
I know, isn't that a weird feeling? You're I don't know, we got so used to folder based, but you're like, I don't know, the file was pretty nice though.
That file is very very tidy.
What's so nice about it is you can compose it as well, so you can split off sections. You're like, these are my API routes, and then you import them and you prefix them with /API. And then
I think you mean you have to put it in a special folder called Blurb API.
Yeah.
File /source/API/download/
and then put it in squares and squares maybe put ...
Yeah, triple dots means lots of files.
So one of the things that was important to us as well when we were building this, you're writing in TypeScript. That's what we do. You're a TypeScript developer or JavaScript developer. You've subscribed to the contract of the language. The language allows you to import and export things, and you have a module graph, and it's got rules, and you understand them. Then along comes a framework, and it says, hey, forget those rules. We have this thing called a magic export. So export this thing with a certain name, and we'll hook it up for you. Don't worry about how it happens in the background. That's not your concern. And you, the user, cannot reason about how that got on the screen unless you read the docs. You could imagine, but you're not able to look at the code and decipher that yourself. And there's no command click on a thing to see where it goes. You're like, somehow this loading indicator or this error page or this data, the data gets into my component somehow. And that didn't feel right to me. I really wanted to surface the parts of the language that were real, the contract that you've subscribed to when you learned TypeScript or JavaScript. I wanted to make sure that you could reason about everything you were building just using those ideas, not someone else's ideas. And I think that's really important.
So is that the difference? Is that because there's a little bit of why here, right? There's we did one thing and then that's over now, and we're doing it all over again, which I think you said is a unique opportunity to get to do a totally fresh take. And is that the big why? Is the less magic, more not 100%.
Magic? Every integration that we had to do for Storybook or Jest or anything, the fact that we introduced magic made those jobs much, much harder. And then it also made it more difficult for people down the line to integrate something new. Because we weren't following the contracts of the language, everyone has this like sort of basis that they're working from, which is TypeScript, and then you introduce new kinds of syntax, which are just magic exports, but it is a whole new concept that doesn't make sense to the language. And then you have to somehow figure out how to make that work in all the other, in the rest of the ecosystem. And we also have a rule that we're like, we don't want to generate any types. It just doesn't feel right. I don't want to have to run a server and then get my types out there. Because what if I'm not running my server and I look at the things and I'm like, it looks fine. And then I try and run the server and then it's not. So like, it just didn't feel like the right thing to do.
We had a discussion yesterday at work. It was about asset delivery inside a package, like a design system. And what I wanted to do was do import my SVG from my svg.svg, like you can do in Vite and Webpack. There's a plugin for it, Rollup, or a lot of tool chains. But
you get a URL.
You get either a URL to like where it is in the final dist, or it can just slurp up the code as like a blob, like a HTML, snippet. But what I think what sort of the twist was, if we went down this path and leveraged Vite or whatever we were using to do this task, now everyone has to adopt our tool chain inside of their tool chain. And that felt like a bad decision to us. We said, let's again, like stick to the native sort of way to do it. And
which is that you can't import SVG. So too bad.
SOL, sucker. Yeah. Almost. There's a weird hack where you can go like source equals new URL, my svg.svg, comma, import.meta.
What?
So you get the location of it applied to the new URL. But there's still, that felt okay. But then now you have to tell people, okay, now go make sure you slurped up all the assets from the thing. So we ended up just including it exporting a JS const or instead of a SVG, but which is not my favorite either. But it was sort of this conundrum of, if we decide to do it one way, we have now, and we trick the platform and we invent a new way to do SVG inclusion that is not native to JavaScript, but we're going to do it. Now everyone has to do it our way. And that was sort of just something we couldn't do as a low-level library tool, that the kind of tool we are.
Funny.
We had another one. Where, you have a big object of design tokens, right? Like background, card, color, pink, or however you want to structure that, times 1,000. You can do that, and you put it into Webpack. It'll tree shake that object into only the pieces that you're using. That's cool. But if you switch over to ES build, like raw ES build, it does not tree shake that. So you have to configure like rollup to tree shake it. You have to configure ES build to tree shake it. We can't use these giant objects because we can't guarantee that everyone's going to tree shake it. So they'll just end up with a 20 megabyte bundle because they didn't turn on tree shaking true. So object tree shaking true. So there's lots to think about at this level that you're operating at, I think, is what I want to say.
And we set out with these principles and we wrote them down, and they come from a place where I am geographically located. The principles are informed from where I am right now. I'm in South Africa. We have really poor people and really rich people. I think we have the highest income disparity in the world.
We're catching up. Don't worry.
Well, then what I'm about to say is going to resonate with you. So people here don't have very good mobile phones. They have mobile phones. Everyone does. The networks are also pretty fast, but bandwidth is expensive, and so is memory on phones, and phones are slow. They're not the best things you have out there. So we designed this framework with these principles in mind in order to deliver the least amount of JavaScript, and consume the least amount of bandwidth possible. And we picked Cloudflare for a very particular reason, because they have 330 nodes throughout the world. And they're free. As a hosting provider, they're free. So people in my backyard that want to build software for their community can. They can just build the thing that they care about, host it on Cloudflare, and their consumers of that software will have a good experience because we've reduced the JavaScript requirement of the framework. How we got to that was through these principles that we've set about, and the principles inform every decision that we make. So we don't integrate a third-party package from a profitable from a startup, for instance. We'd rather give you WebAuthn or passkey auth or username or password auth. If you want to use something else, that's totally fine. But we don't want any of our users to have to pay $20 to subscribe to a SaaS or even to pay money to host, because we want the majority of the world to be able to participate in software. And I think with the advent of AI, more and more and more people are going to come to the forefront building things, and they need really good, solid principles in order to understand how things are flowing through the code. And the hard part, if software isn't the hard part anymore, then maybe hosting it is, maybe deciding which database is. There's a lot of decision you have to make about, which database am I going to use? Which queue provider am I going to use? Where am I going to host these files? We took all that away, and one command and you get it all. So if it's fast for us, it's going to be fast for you. And there are optimizations that you can introduce, single page apps with client-side navigation to make it feel amazingly fast for your users.
I love that. I think having economics inside your principles, baked into your principles, this is how we view, it doesn't, by your geolocation or by your experience, it can't just work on a $3,000, $4,000 MacBook. It has to go farther than that.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact is that we also want to teach developers really good web fundamentals. I want to give you the foundation of what it is to build for the web. So if you learn our framework and you get a new job using Next or whatever, or any of those other frameworks, it's all going to make sense to you because you're going to have a really good foundation. You're going to be like, all right, I get it. Request response makes sense to me. I know how to do authentication. I know to do sessions, middleware, cookies, headers. All that stuff is abstracted from you in most modern frameworks. And it really, I don't know why.
So it is interesting. There's some scales being balanced here, though, because in a way it's much less opinionated and much more down to the metal frameworky stuff. And I get all that. That's happening here. Much less choices made for you, much more reason about. But it did crank up the dial on the Cloudflare thing. Like you are all in on Cloudflare. Like that's it. So it does introduce this concept of like you wake up one day and Cloudflare's got a new CEO and they decided like, hey, listen, things got to change around here. The economy has changed. Pricing is now 20x what it used to be. And you don't like it, then go somewhere else. You have no choice. Like that would just be a bad day for you because now users of this framework are like, we chose this and we are locked to this. And that sucks. But it's close to the metal, so hopefully moving isn't so bad. But like it is a form of lock-in, in a way. That,
and I'm what I would say is if that ever happens, parts of the parts of Cloudflare that we care about are open source. You can self-host. You don't have to pick the database. You don't have to pick the queue, the R2. Those things are also open source. So you could essentially like do it yourself. In the meantime, just use the thing and don't worry about it. But I mean,
so like a pretty basic app will run on Cloudflare free even or not? Yeah, for free.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
just
even
have
need a
such
credit card.
Generous plans.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I mean the Pro app is $5, and then you're paying for like usage. So if you have R2, you're paying, which is like a big file storage thing. You're paying for that. If you're using AI, I think they give you 100,000 requests, or I'm not sure what the unit is, but you can even use AI stuff for free, and you can use the latest models from Llama to Gemini. I think it's fantastic.
I haven't really run into anybody that was too turned off. I just felt like mentioning it, but some people are like, "That sounds awesome," and I'm probably closer to that because I like Cloudflare. I've liked it for a long time. I have some stock in it, by the way. Not to be a
stakeholder
it's like $100,
over here.
So I'm just saying it's really gonna shoot up one of these days. But I bought it. It was the only like principled stock buy I ever did because I'm like, this is actually like really good. It's literally better tech than AWS. I know they offer like 50x more, but I'm like, AWS wishes they had as like cool of smooth tech as this. They don't.
Absolutely.
Cloudflare's like cooler and smoother and better in so many ways that it's like maybe someday they really will compete on that level. I mean, don't they think of themselves as like the fourth cloud or something like that, where they're clearly behind Microsoft and Google and AWS, but like to be fourth in such a big market is like so huge. But they're fourth in size, but they're probably higher than that in like developer love share. People
or
like
even
them.
Amount of traffic. I don't know the stats, but sure, enterprise internal app is hosted on GCP and makes Google a bunch of money. The Verge goes through Cloudflare. I'm just assuming, but
well, hell yeah, it does. I'm sure it does. Anyway, so like, what do you get if you're not only not worried about this, but you're very happy to just go all in on Redwood SDK and Cloudflare and everything that Cloudflare has to do? What does it look like? Are you're buying your domain through Cloudflare? You got your DNS pointed through it for sure. You can wire up auth, right? What does Cloudflare have for auth? What do they call it? Is that zero trust thing?
Yeah,
they don't
but
really?
it's only for enterprise, and
okay, so
really,
no.
I think you only can do 50 users or something like that. I wish they did. I really wish they did. It would make my job so much easier.
Okay, so BYO auth, but they don't have that. But they do have files, clearly, R2, and R2 is like better than competitive. It has the thing where it's free bandwidth,
Egress.
essentially. Egress? Yeah, that's ridiculous. So it's just, you're paying for just what you store in there. So if you're storing freaking user avatars, like it's not, the cost will be nothing. Which is great. And then you get a database too, you said what is that called? S1 or something?
It's called D1.
D1, and that's like MySQL.
It's SQLite. So it's SQLite.
Okay.
The caveat is that you're restricted to a 10 gigabyte database if you're using D1. But if you're using durable objects, each one of those durable objects, you can basically have infinite amounts of databases. They're all only going to be 10 gigabytes in size, though. So that's something you have to keep in mind.
Do you have to use a durable object to use the database?
You don't have to. You don't have to.
Okay.
But you
is the strategy there like user 1 gets database 1, user 2 gets database 2? Is that the strategy people sort of use to get around that?
I don't know what the strategy is for getting around that. So the
but
thing
10
is,
gigs in a database is a lot, to be fair.
Yeah, but it's not crazy, right? Like, I think the thing is, and you also get key value store. Sorry, but the thing is,
you get KB, which is different.
Yeah, you can just it's completely different. But if you need to use an external database, MySQL or Postgres, you totally can as well. And then they have something called Hyperdrive or something like Hyperdrive. I don't know what the name is exactly, but it accelerates your queries.
I see. If you're connecting to like a Supabase or something instead, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's clever, actually. I think that's cool. You're like, still use us. We'll still be your like orchestrator to talk to other services, and that they can do it better than you can because it's fat pipes talking to fat pipes behind the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so and then, but there's
Hey,
more
Chris,
stuff.
that might be a tagline for our podcast.
Yeah.
Good. That's
I
good.
always liked that the it's like when I thought about workers. So workers is a Cloudflare concept that has to do with routing too. So I'm interested in your take on this. Like let's say I make, I could make a worker for the homepage of Shop Talk Show, and one of the workers can do all kinds of stuff, but it can I don't think they call it an interrupter, but I like that word. It's kind of like an interrupter for a request that it could go through a worker before it comes to my server, and it like gives Cloudflare permission to be this like man in the middle or something, be like, ooh, I see that request, I'm going to deal with it first and then I'm going to go to the server. But or it could do them both at the same time and stuff. So one of the demos that I've seen with a worker is that it could ask the server for the response, and then it could like mess with it. And in fact, they have their own thing called HTML rewriter, which is pretty neat. That is like a way to look at the DOM or whatever, look at a chunk of HTML that is coming through and be like, ooh, I'm actually going to mess with this quick. I'm going to inject the weather or something at the top of it. But it happened before the request even came down to it's not JavaScript doing it. It's like, it's been messed with before it even gets to the user's computer. It's like, it's freaking amazing. It's such good technology, workers. But workers have URLs. You tie a worker to like, okay, well, when do you want that worker to run? At what URL would you like it to go up on? And then it feels like, oh shoot, that's like another place that routing is happening, sort of, kind of. So like, does Redwood SDK like, it has something to do with workers, doesn't it? Are you using workers to accomplish the React server-side components or React server components and all that? Is that a worker, kind of?
So our server is one single worker, and then
it is. The whole thing is a worker, because they don't give you a node server. Like that's what they have. You have to use a worker.
Yeah. So we have this one single node server, and in the latest Vite plugin that Cloudflare is gonna publish, they allow you to have multiple workers, and it will tie them together. Cloudflare has this really interesting concept called bindings that make services and workers and different services feel like they're on the same machine. So you can just say env dot the binding name, and then you can access your database or access your AI or access your KV. And it feels like they're on the same machine. And that's really cool, because that means you don't have to install a client library. And most of the time, the communication is just fetch over the wire. So it's request response. And it's automatically configured for you. You just are saying, I have a database. It's called this thing.
I see. So it already is one big old worker. So, and you don't, I was thinking like, oh, it's like one worker per route. That's normally how I think of it, but it's just not.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. And the React server component stuff is code we've written ourselves. We are unashamedly in love with React, and I think it is a really good mental model if you want to build UI. And we didn't want to be opinionated about like the UI library itself, like Shad or Tailwind, because we feel like those decisions are very personal, and I have my personal preferences, but I don't want to push that onto other people. And since we're just a Vite platform, just integrate it yourself. Everything has really good docs for doing that.
I guess if it's running MiniFlare and it's a worker, sorry to drag on this, but that means you can just use HTML rewriter right in there, right?
You could, yeah. There's like, we don't abstract.
And that feels very
any
weird
of that away from
to
you.
use JSX and HTML rewriter, but okay.
It's the power you have.
That's the power you have. Okay, that's cool. And okay, let's circle back to one thing Dave said earlier that I thought was, I remember in the early days, we probably did it on this show. We looked at Redwood.js and be like, look at all these opinions. But I really like this one, which is maybe one you don't like now, but we'll get to it. And that was that one called cells. And I believe it had some kind of like, when you're going to make a React component, you should describe all these different states. Do I have that right? It was like, you should describe the empty state. Like, instead of that being on you, we're going to make that like a fundamental concept that we think you should do. And like, well, it's fetching or whatever. You should describe its skeleton, or do I have that right? It was like forced you to think of all the different states, which was like good hygiene for your app. but that's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
So what's up with that? Yeah.
So, I mean, how we implemented that on the like Webpack level, on the Babel level, was we would have a look at these files. If they were named cell, we would have a look to see what the exports were, and we would associate them to the correct loading position in the sequence of events if you're doing something over the network. So to begin with, we'd say, all right, there's a loading component. The loading component should show a skeleton, and we would look for that and show it to you. And then we'd be like, all right, if there's an error, that's what it should look like. If the return was empty, let's do this. If it wasn't, let's do that. And that felt like the right thing to do at the time. We actually got that idea from Storybook because they did something very similar in the way that you defined how your Storybook site was configured. But the problem was we abstracted that away from you. So if you wanted to deviate from that, or you just felt like something was a little bit different, that file, you could not get to the logic that was picking the right part at the right time. It was completely hidden from you. So what we could have done was just surface that to you, given it to you as a file, and then you just wrap your components in this function and maybe use a key value pair or something like that.
Oh, I see. Like you could replicate the concept of it in your own wrapper component
Or
or
at
something.
class. We don't talk about those anymore. Go ahead, everybody else. You're
it a
light years
class
ahead
with
of me.
Is it a class with a K or with a C?
In React, it has a.
Oh man, I do miss classes, React classes.
Hey,
I'm with you.
All right. Well,
dream is
that's
still
interesting.
alive.
So I guess you had these design principles and it didn't fit them.
Because that's magic,
didn't fit
right?
them.
Because it had to be like blog post, cell, loading, or I forget the naming convention,
Yeah.
but you had to have these magic sort of names to my cells, correct?
Yeah, and then
It'll come back someday. Somebody's going to steal that.
I mean,
I could see it being in.
It's in Next, it's in Remix. They all have this concept of
they
export
do?
something that has a particular name, and we'll connect the dots for you in the background.
Yeah. Okay.
Suspense is almost in this world. It's kind of it's sort of React suspense.
Yeah, I mean, that gives you the loading one, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe error, too. I don't know.
Yeah, they've got an error boundary, and they've just introduced something called a view transition, which actually leverages the view transition API in the browser. So I have a demo out now that allows you to do single page app navigation, and we use a view transition there to switch between different pages, and you get like a free animation in that switch over. It's really nice. It feels
I
idiomatic.
get it, and it's nice that they support it, but it's one of those things like the web platform does something, and they're like, oh crap, well, how are we going to support this? I guess we need an entirely new component, and we expect to wrap all your crap in it. It feels like reactionary to me in a way that like I just wish wasn't necessary. Like, wow, what's the next thing that the web's going to support that we're going to have to jack in there somehow?
Yeah, I think it was smart just because every component is a baby state machine, and you could go all the way to the like X state level where you create machine and spit this out. But I like that. I like that Redwood's component model acknowledged that components are little state machines, and here's some very common states that you're going to run into. I think But I think it's maybe not a Redwood level. I think it's maybe like a React level thing that should be concerned. Like that should exist somewhere.
Totally.
Whatever framework that bakes in a X state machine, but feels less like X state. I like X state, but
we have all the evidence we need that we all refuse to learn state machines. It's not happening.
So you have to
force us to.
You have to.
Maybe.
Yeah, you have to like gaslight somebody into like using something cool, and
that's accidentally a state machine.
That's accidentally a state machine.
I see. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be us.
I think
probably not.
Yeah,
probably not.
I think we're about to probably wrap up here. I am curious what's been the community feedback. You did a major shift, a major pivot to a whole new idea. Is the community following you? Are they middle fingers? Are they how's that been?
It's a little bit of some of that and a little bit of some other stuff. Like we are receiving a tremendous amount of love. People are surprised by what we've built. They're like, I would say smitten is a really good word to describe the feelings that people have when they use Redwood SDK. And of course, there are people that are not happy with it. It is our strategy to support Redwood GraphQL long term and to make it so that you can get off Redwood GraphQL itself and then own those parts yourself. I don't want to put anyone in a situation where they're feeling completely trapped. But the reason why we shifted from one to the other was because growth had stalled and it wasn't sustainable. And we needed to come up with a new idea so that we could, find the new thing that was going to make sense for the way the web is developed today. We started Redwood SDK 5 years ago, and it was built with AWS Lambdas in mind. And that technology really didn't go anywhere. It didn't get to where it had to go. It kind of stalled, and that was a bet that we made that didn't pan out. And I think that's part of the problem. You make these bets on technology, and technology evolves. You've got to make sure that you have enough flexibility in what you've built to evolve with it. And the shape that we have right now feels that it is that thing because it focuses on solid principles.
Yeah, and you have one possible buyer, and they're probably going to be interested. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that would obviously be very exciting, but we have, I think, a really good plan towards monetization that isn't hosting. I can tell you exactly what it is if you are interested.
Well, drop it. Yeah.
Yeah. More surprises.
Of course we're
Second
interested.
surprise. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So our tagline is, this could be the start of something small. And we have this nostalgic imagery that harks back to the time where PCs were being introduced into people's homes. We actually took all the print ads from that era and we're like, companies are trying to convince you to get a computer in your home. We're trying to do the same thing, except not computers, software. We want you to write your own software. We think that that's important. We want you to scratch your own itch, solve a problem, and then if you solve it for your friends, your family, or your community, it means that you don't necessarily need to focus on a profit motive. You don't have to build a brand. You don't have to build a pricing strategy, a support strategy. You just solve the problem. Your friends are using it. They love it. So take that source code, put it on our store. We have a store for source code. We're busy building it, and sell it a once-off license to the source code itself, to someone else that might benefit from that source code. Let them host it in their own Cloudflare, and they can change and modify that code for their own purposes. So
it's eBay for GitHub.
Yeah.
Like Gumroad, or this or templates like Notion templates, but you pay, right? I think that's kind of cool, like app templates. Like,
no, I like it. Yeah. I like that you said like it's not going to be hosting, only because I don't know. That's just it has mixed results, including failure many times. Yeah.
And it's like counterintuitive to the goals of a framework. I always think that like CI/CD is actually one of the most evil businesses that someone can start. It seems like a fun business to start, and you're like, I'm going to make these machines fast.
Oh no, it's inversely. I totally agree with this but we're in the business too of actually lining up the incentive of making fast builds. Like, I think Netlify are good people. They're cool, right? But they charge by the minute. They are incentivized to make their builds worse. They probably won't, because if you do so bad there that you lose customers because they just don't like the product, that's one thing. But like just the way that incentives work in the world, they're literally incentivized to slow down their builds, to run it
Absolutely.
on crappier computers, because then your minutes are higher or whatever. They're not going to do that. I'm not calling them out on that, but that's the way that incentives are set up. And that's true for all kinds of CI. CI of any kind is like that. Charged by the minute, and then, yeah, right.
It's like bandwidth. We've seen this
charged by the minute, but you don't control the minutes. It's stupid.
Yeah. So for me, I was like, we could go in on hosting, but inevitably, we're going to try and make that super profitable down the line once we find some critical mass, and it just doesn't make sense from my perspective. Yeah,
I
I also
like
do
this.
not
I
care
like
about
that.
building infrastructure. Like, it's
Yeah.
not my thing. I like to
I,
sleep at night.
well, I like the community style of it. I like that idea of you're providing something for somebody. They build with it. They think it's cool. They can pop it up on the shop, sell it, and then somebody else can come and build something, and it kind of builds that community. I think that's cool and symbiotic. I hope it works.
Me
We
too.
always need alternate funding, right? We need alternate funding models for all this stuff, and more than just
Yeah, it's
ads,
like-
more than just a CI somewhere. So
It's like, on the one hand, you can sell to enterprise for these massive contracts. On the other hand, you build a SaaS, and then in the middle, you're giving it away for free. And that's sort of like, and then you're still doing support. Like, you're still helping people install it on their systems, or they're opening pull requests. There's got to be some way that, if you've built something that's valuable, you can share it with the world, with the world's ability to also modify it for their own needs, but not redistribute it and things like that. I know there are going to be bad actors in our store, and it's just something we have to figure out as it goes along. I like to think of it as Steam, but instead of for games, it's for source code.
There you go.
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So you've already started building that, or that's your idea?
Yeah, we've started building it. It's called shareware.dev.
Nice. What framework?
Bringing back shareware. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, and we're starting off actually initially with a concept called add-ons. So we are not opinionated in our framework, but say for instance you're building a marketing site and you're a tech company, maybe in Y Combinator. You need a blog, you need a changelog, you need a GitHub stars widget, you need some social thing that shows you're viable in the world. Go into Cursor, type, I need an add-on that does a blog. You'll reach our store, you can install the blog, you get the source code for the blog, and we're going to, then we're saying, okay, here's the database for the blog, it's MDX, we're using Tailwind with shared components, etc., etc. And these add-ons are also part of the strategy to help this framework grow and be a little more opinionated, but in a way that allows you to make decisions. I think shareware.dev is probably just a blank page right now, but we have an early design for it.
It's fun.
Nice.
Fun. I like options. That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Peter, for coming on the show. I know it's late for you. For people who aren't following you and giving you money, how can they do that?
So I'm on Twitter. My username is appfactory, APP Factory. And you can go to the website RedwoodSDK.com and please star it, because that matters to us. It really does. If anything I've said has resonated with you today, reach out to me. I would love to give you a demo of what we've built and convince you that this is the best framework on earth. It won't be hard.
Cool. Well,
Nice.
I'm going to say, if this was an episode of Subway Takes, I'm way closer now than I think I was before, but I'm curious more about web components, but we can talk offline. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for coming on the show. And thank you, dear listener, for downloading this in your podcatcher. Just be sure to share it up. There's how people find out about the show. And follow us on socials. And then join us in the Discord, patreon.com/shoptalkshow. And Chris, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
New response, shoptalkshow.com.